Alright everyone, it's Jira Bro back with another video, and today we're gonna talk about the workflows. As admins, a lot of your work is gonna be about configuring the workflows. And what do I mean by configuring the workflows is, of course, to configuring the workflow and then show them on the board, because if you configure the workflow and you do nothing on the board, as such as the changing the bar columns, the workflows are basically useless. Alright, let's go to our issues in here. Let's go to workflows. And so there is already for the workflow project. So we're going to copy that, and the best practice is to copy the workflows. Why? Because it's gonna save you a lot of time when you're creating a workflow, so you don't have to be creating everything from scratch. I mean, you can do that, but you know, the key here is to be efficient. Alright, so what I'm going to be doing in here, so workflow workflow for a project. Alright, I'm gonna name it like this. I'm gonna copy it, and as you can see, you already have something to work with. Now, when it comes to the workflows in Jira, there are three not basic, but default status categories. And those are to do, in progress, and done. So to do is marked in the gray color. The in progress status category is in progress, and done is in the status category of done. Now, there are a bunch of things that you can actually do in here. This one that says all is allow all statuses to transition to this issue. When the workflow is like this, you can move your created issue around your board, so without any restrictions. Now, what are the restrictions in here? So for example, I'm going to delete this selected for development because I don't really like this one. And instead of having a backlog, I'm just gonna be using a to-do status. So we can actually be going with something that is, I don't want to say cliche, but you're gonna see this workflow like a trillion times. To do, in progress, and done. Alright, let's keep it simple. Now, here's the thing that I want to do. So when I create my project, when I create my issue, I want this issue to go to the to-do status. I don't want it to go into the backlog status. But what happens? Already, when the issue is getting created, it goes to the backlog status. No problem. Select this line here. This line here, by the way, is a transition. I'm gonna talk about this in a bit. And then you just want to move it in here, and what's gonna ask you is what you want to actually name this. So I want this, instead of backlog, to be in to do. Alright, this is what happens now. When the issue gets created, it goes into the to-do status. No restrictions whatsoever. But let us follow the software development process, right? So in here I'm gonna add another status, and this status is going to be in testing. Now when I add a complete new status in here, Jira is gonna prompt you and it's gonna ask you, okay, this is the name, in the category this is a mandatory field. You will see that it will give you 2 more. So I want this to be in the status category. Now the thing is, when it's red like this, so it says there are no incoming transition to this status. It's totally fine. So it's like this: developer takes a task, and from into do it goes into the progress, right? So we want to make sure the developer only can, move the ticket into do status and be from in progress, from to do to in progress. Okay, so we don't want to allow them to actually go from to do to done, right? Because we don't want someone who is, slacking on the job, because, well, first of all, our client is going to be mad. Probably that developer is going to get fired, and probably that client is not going to be wanting to work with us anymore. So we don't want that to happen. So with the to do, I'm going to make a transition in here. All right, so this is going to be a new transition. So I'm going to say progress. Okay, so I'm not going to be showing any of the screens, because you have options to actually show screens when some transition is actually happening, right? By default, most of the time, what is going to happen on your job, you're going to be using the resolve issue screen, right? And when it comes to the resolve issue screen, that there is a complete different topic based on the resolutions that are actually happening when the issue is done. That will come later. So I will leave it like this for now. So we have a transition in here, but this transition now is like, all right, so that means anyone can actually do this. But like I said, from our scenario, we want only developers to be able to do this. So what I'm hinting on here, I'm hinting on the project role. So that means project role. What is that? Well, basically a project role is a role that every member of your team has. So what is that? So it can be a developer, it could be a designer, it could be a product owner, it could be a project manager, it could be the CEO, it could be anyone who is actually involved on that project. So we want to say it like this: we want to restrict only for a developer to be able to move the issue, okay, to move the issue from to do in progress. And it actually makes sense because they're the ones who are starting to to work on that feature. So how actually we do this? In workflows, we have 5 terms in here. We have properties. I haven't really used properties that much, to be quite honest, but properties could be used. There are triggers. What this actually happens, the triggers, it's self-explanatory. When there's a transition, then a trigger, actually what it actually does, it starts an action in here. Then you have conditions. It's like condition only if someone is this, if the issue field is this. Then you have the validators. What is a validator? When validators are actually appearing when something is already being done, then the validator gets activated. And then you have post functions. So post functions, this is usually what happens when you move the issues to the done status. This is usually what happens. Now, this right here, done, doesn't have to be like this. It could be another status. It could be closed. It could be finished. It could be something else. But usually, it's going to be like this. Alright, so let us move on. Then we want to transition this in progress to in testing. And I'm going to name this QA. Let's make it simple. So what this means, this is simply explained that the QA, that developer, when they're actually done with their task, that task needs to be tested by the QA. So they move it from in progress to in testing. Now, there are two options that could be possible in here. So, as you already know, when it comes to the testing, there are two scenarios basically. Task can either pass or either task can fail. It's really simple. So, it could be from testing to done. And now we want to do it like this. We want to select a screen, and you want to find a specific screen that says resolve the issue screen. I'm gonna click on add. Right, gonna name it just once more. You're gonna see what is going to happen in there. So what is actually happening here? The thing is that is happening is on the last step, what can QA do? They can say, you know what, this is actually done, or this is going to be like closed. It's not like that it's finished or something like that. It's closed. Why is that? Maybe management said, well, you know what, let's just push it for this string. Just push it for this sprint. We don't really need to be focused on the bugs that much. We will fix them later. Let's just show the MVP to our stakeholder. And it's just being moved to closed resolution. All right. So we have this option, and then what could happen in here? Well, test failed. Yeah, let me just test passed. But sometimes doesn't have to be like this. So let's not confuse things that much. So if it's like rushing through the things and everything, let's just move it from to do and done. I'm gonna say close the issue, and I'm going to say here resolve issue screen. Alright, it kind of looks a bit messy, so let me just fix it in here because I like it to be, readable. and also we don't need this at all. So now this is starting to look like a more complex workflow. Now let's go back to our transitioning here. The very first thing that we're gonna do is click on the conditions, and when you click on conditions, they're gonna say, well, there are no conditions in here. Well, I'm gonna say add a condition. Now, what are you having here? So first of all, you can have user in any group. Users in group. User is in project role. Alright? So the user is in the project role of a developer. And then I'm going to close this window. Now what happens? This will be updated, of course, because I haven't finished with this yet. And I don't have a QA in here, so I need to create a project role, right? How can I do this? Well, I can go with type in GG twice, so this goes right to the administration, and I can say project roles. All right, so project roles. Alright, so now in here I want to name it QA. I'm gonna add it. Then I'm gonna go back to my workflow. I haven't finished with it yet. So one thing to remember is when it comes to updating your workflow. Now, there are some things that you can change when the workflow is being active, but most of the things you cannot change when the workflow is being active. So what that means, when there needs to be the change in a workflow, the best practice is to make that workflow inactive first, and then do all of the changes, and then make it active again, so those changes could be applied. Alright, so there's going to be another thing. Alright, so this is the first condition. The second condition is only the users in the project role of a QA can make these transitions. Now, the thing is also, we need to do it in here as well. So we need to add a condition. User in a project role of a QA. They give it back to the developers. They say, you know what, guys, there's some things that need to be done here. Alright, and then conditions. So it's gonna be like user in a project role of a QA. They're saying like, yep, this is done. But we also want another thing to happen here. So this is what will happen after the transition will actually occur. But usually you will be using post functions at the end of a workflow. So now, what happens in here? So, you know that there are when there is a resolution, the issues get like scratched, you know. So that is an important thing. But the thing is, since we are actually gonna have the
the screen, the resolution screen that is showing to us, we don't need to update the field of a resolution. Now the question is, well, okay, where we can actually update it? It's pretty simple. We can go from done, and basically when something is done, you cannot, take it back unless there is something, well, very specific. Let's say the team is in the rush and they need to complete like a lot of bugs and like a lot of things are actually happening, and there is a demo, and that certain bug actually happens on the sprint demo. That definitely wouldn't be something that we all want to happen, right? So let us make an exception in here. Let's go from done into testing. Okay, and please enter a name. I'm gonna say here go back, and from the transition I'm gonna say for the post functions, I'm gonna add a post function right here. I'm gonna update the issue field of resolution, and I'm gonna say none. Why is this? Because I want to remove that resolution, because, well, you know what, that issue still hasn't been finished. Now what we need to do, we need to associate this with a workflow scheme. So what we do, we also gonna copy the workflow scheme. We're gonna go for the inactive, and we're gonna search for it. And there we go, we find it out. And this is gonna be, I'm gonna say workflow. I'm gonna say workflow scheme. This, I don't need this. Right, so I'm gonna add an existing workflow, and I'm gonna search for the workflow that I was working on. There we go. So for what issues this workflow you want to be, usually it's gonna be for epic stories, tasks, subtasks. Sometimes it's gonna be for the bugs, so I'm gonna say bugs as well. And I'm going to remove this simplified workflow in here because I'm not using the simplified workflow anymore. When I'm done with this, I go back to my project, and then I go to the project settings. I go for the workflows. All right. And within the workflow, what I want to do is I want to switch the scheme. Alright, and I want to select workflow scheme, and I'm gonna say associate. And when there are some issues in there that need to be migrated, you need to select the previous statuses that those issues were in, and then actually map it with the new statuses that are gonna be appearing within that project. So keep that in mind. So that is something that might appear to you. And when you're actually done, so when you create a workflow, apply a workflow scheme, apply it to the project, still it's nothing unless you go here, you configure your board, you go for columns. Alright, so basically I don't need a backlog, so it's gonna be a mapped issue, and it's gonna be to do. It's gonna be, oh wait, I'm not gonna delete this one, I'm just gonna I'm just gonna drop it in here. I'm gonna put testing in here. I'm gonna select and say in testing. I'm gonna say to do. Alright, and when I go back to the board, when I create an issue, I'm gonna say test. I'm gonna click on create. Now notice what happens when I want to move an issue. It gives me options to either move it to the in progress or move it to the done. So I just moved it to the in progress issue. Now if I go for the project settings, if I go for the people, you're gonna say multiple roles, and as you can see in here it says I am a developer right here. So I was able to do this, and I'm actually on the project itself. Now if I want to move it again, I cannot do anything because these are the permissions. Now the QA needs to come in and they need to move this issue around. So basically that is how it works. All right. So